that is rough that you can't talk with your son. Does the church teach his glorified body would be free of that block? Obviously, there are certain things that are not included, but the idea, and there's been speculation, even among Protestants, that, let's say you died when you were 1 year old and you haven't developed any language at all. Would there be no development of language? Or let's say you died when you were like 110 and you had dementia. Would you be in such a state for your whole life or whatnot? Well, obviously not. One individual had theorized that we would be in our prime. We would all be our prime, but we would know each other. That idea is kind of helpful to me in thinking about my son and those who died because they were consumed by sharks. That yes, the biological difficulties that we are either born with or acquire, because we can get cancer and other things like that, have unbeneficial mutations that end up ravaging the body, unfortunately. That the glorified, resurrected body would be free from death, and it would be free from those sorts of things. So if a person suffered horribly the last 20 years of their life, then obviously those things would not persist. So I do have a hope in that I will be able to have a conversation with my son one day, and imagine the tears of joy that I would have having him in his right mind telling me how much I meant to him during his life. Yeah. Because God would certainly make known to him, even through infused knowledge, that of things that he may not have been able to understand prior. Is there an official church teaching that lays all of that out? I don't know if what the church teaches in that goes into great detail. I think that would be a good conversation that we could have on stream. I certainly could see if there's any dogma or ideas in relation to dogma. That touches upon that. I know in the Catholic Church, one of the main things that is important to note would be that in the beatific vision, right, God would make us suitable for the beatific vision, which means that our intellect would be at rest or be fulfilled. It would reach its natural end in God, who is beauty itself, truth itself, and goodness itself. That his intellect would no longer be confined or bound by an aspect of his nature that is inhibiting that nature to flourish or to be unencumbered towards its natural end. I think that's how I would want to say it. So I think there's plenty in Catholic teaching that implies everything that I'm saying. Yeah. Because obviously disease, death, all those sorts of things, while they are natural and even normative, normative meaning that that death occurs to everyone, lest God give somebody a special grace. Maybe Enoch, maybe Elijah. So I think there's a lot to be said in what is the Adamic state of man according to Catholic theology, and then how does that relate or help us better understand what a glorified resurrected body would be like. Certainly not a mere restoration of Adamic perfection, but it would be more, as much more as grace builds upon nature, not just in that state, but in being suitable for something new, something more glorious. But our original parents, according to Catholic theology, were endowed with impassibility, with immortality, and infused knowledge, things that wouldn't be inherent to us by nature, right? Because by nature, apart from are unaided by grace, apart from grace, does what nature does. And in fact, one of the main theological points to understand why God allows suffering, why He allows things to proceed as they do, is because God created nature. So nature does what God allows nature to do what nature does, because nature, because nature's God is the one that created nature. Okay? So God allows nature to do what nature does. That's not to say that God hasn't at any point in time given grace to not merely be subject to the processes of nature. And so grace us. That was the original idea, that we would not be in a state of mere nature, but we would, while participating in nature, as everything else does in nature, we would be graced in a way that that builds upon that nature and lifts us up and gives to us preternatural gifts, something outside of nature, right? That can preserve us, right? Which is fine. I mean, because it's grace that preserves us from slipping back into non-being, to keep us in existence, right? To keep us slipping back into nothingness. And God likewise can give grace that preserves us from natural processes. Not exactly like how would that work, you know? Like, I don't know. We age because the replication process breaks down over time. You know, copies of cells, and so on and so forth. At some point, things are going to decay. But the second law of thermodynamics, the law of entropy, technically is more nuanced than that, and that's only in a closed system. So it's granted even within the order of nature that an order can be sustained or renewed from energy from without. which is basically the case when we eat food, for example. We prolong our life, otherwise we would just decay away and we'd die. We're actually bringing in from outside of ourselves to combat the law of entropy in that sense. I try not to speculate too much concerning the state of Adamic perfection and how it occurred, when it occurred, all those sorts of things. I'm open to all scientific investigation on the matter. But I do think it helps us better understand a little bit of, well, what would be a restoration of, not just a restoration, but a renovation or a glorification of nature, not just a restoration of it. And perhaps that language is a bit, can be misconstrued. I mean that nature apart from grace. Yes, a nature apart from grace. Ouch. But very good questions. I don't know how we got on that. I think we were talking about my son. Time warp. Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, you know. The idea, though, in Catholic theology, if I may point to it, is that in looking upon the human nature of Christ, right? If we look at the human nature of Christ, the idea is that whatever divinity has done to the human nature of Christ is what we will be in our own nature. That's why it says that, you know, when we see him, we shall be like him, right? We will see him as he is because we will be like him. We'll understand his nature because whatever God has assumed to himself in the incarnation, what he does to human nature and elevating it in the hypostatic union, within it would be by analogy, because obviously in the hypostatic union you have the communicatio idiomatum, you have the communication of idioms, you have the divine nature that infuses the human nature while keeping that human nature intact. But I think it reveals something to us in a bit of what Scripture refers to as when we share in his holiness, or we participate in the divine nature. Some church fathers even go as far as to say things like, God became man so that man could become God. And what they were referring to is theosis, or deification. The idea that whatever glorification of the human nature in the hypostatic union is what we too will experience in our glorified body. And that this is a state that will have infinite potential. It'll have infinite potential. It'll have infinite potentiality for growth and grace and everything else. I can't even imagine what that looks like a billion years from now. Yeah. I mean, I've reflected on these things for sure. I probably have done more reflection on it than I have study. That's why I can reason through a response, but I can't quote you anything. Well, I mean, I've quoted a few things, but it's aspects of the Christian faith that there's so many things to study, right? There's so many things to consider, to read and study, and I and some of these things are indeed shrouded in mystery, as you know, because we're only so much is revealed to us because we're still in the here and now. You know, we're not. We're not post the second coming, you know what I mean? Yeah, there's many years of things to study. So that's one thing I like about the Catholic Church is that you can pick a topic and you can just dive right down into it for many months, and there's still more to explore and consider, you know. Hey Dee, welcome in. Greetings. Hello to you as well. Let's see. It is 10:07. So I like to try to get off around 10 even if I get started late, which I did. But I wanted to make sure I prayed the rosary with my youngest daughter. I've been doing that every night. So, I mean, she normally just drags the rosary around like a snake and stuff like that, but she participates while I do the rosary. I don't have it with me, but while I do the rosary, I during each of the mysteries, I'll bring up an image like this, like while we're reflecting on the agony in the garden. I'll use an image like this. And then we'll go to the scourging of the pillar, and then we'll go to the crowning of thorns, the carrying of the cross, and you know, the crucifixion, to give her a visual while we're doing the rosary. So what she does on my phone, I have these images, she'll swipe. She knows exactly when to swipe during the rosary, and she'll just swipe to the next picture when we go to reflect on the next moment in Christ's passion or some time in his life. Yeah. So yeah, I do the rosary every day, and it's almost always with my youngest daughter. One nice thing about Catholic apologists is that they genuinely care about the correct answer. I would be so frustrated if I were a Muslim because most apologists don't seem to care about misrepresenting their religion. Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, I care a great deal about truth. A great deal about truth. That's one thing that attracts me to the lay Dominicans here. Is their dedication to praying the rosary, so Mary, study, doing this. This is I haven't explicitly stated this, but this is a lay apostolate, what I'm doing right now as a lay Dominican. Having real conversations with real people and praying with people and reading with people and stuff. You know. I do like the discussions. I think sometimes people see that I'm reading a book and they might, you know, this is a good book. And I try to comment on it, and I'm not sure if, you know, I just assume and would pray really that those who might be interested in the subject, you know, would stop by, be led here, and those who need prayer or encouragement, that they would come here. The people struggling with stuff, people with questions.